Egyptian influence, or at least an awareness and an interest in the Levant, can be traced back very early in Egypt's history, all the way back to the Stone Age and the pre-dynastic period, that is before 3100 BC. Civilization in the ancient Near East developed, as I already noted, in two epicenters. One was in Western Asia, in the land between the two rivers, known to the Greeks as Mesopotamia or Mesopotamia, and the other was in the northern Africa region of the Nile Delta, what the Greeks in turn called Aegyptus or Egypt. Now, the presence, as I noted, of major rivers, of enduring water sources in these two areas is the main reason for a civilizational competition in the ancient Near East, and this competition between Mesopotamia and Egypt. And what's most important to remember is that this duality between Egypt and Mesopotamia will continue to determine political developments in the times of the Israelite and Judahite states, the time of the writing of the Bible, and thereafter, and for that matter, all the way up to the present day. These two centers of civilization were joined geographically by the Levant, by Canaan, by Syria, Palestine, where Israel and Judah were situated. The strip of real estate forms what we might call a land bridge between Mesopotamia in the east and Egypt in the west. And the reason that the Levant served as a land bridge is that the vast desert between it and Mesopotamia, this Arabian desert, was really very difficult to traverse. Very few people could do it, and therefore, when traveling to Egypt from Mesopotamia, what one usually did was to head up towards Syria and then around and down through modern-day Lebanon and Israel, and then one crossed another desert that separates Egypt from Israel, but then was right there on Egypt's doorstep. So one had to go up and around, and therefore Israel's political history was very much affected by the competition between Mesopotamia and Egypt. Israel's history may in many ways be viewed in terms of the geographical location on this land bridge, and connecting these imperial centers. And if Israel were located in a different area, it may not have produced the Bible. Anyway, these two centers became homes in much later times, by the way, to major Jewish diaspora centers, communities, in the Babylonian Gola, or the diaspora of Babylon, and then the Egyptian Gola. So that Mesopotamia and Egypt and its relation to the land bridge in Israel are really the three centers of Jewish history from very early to very late stages. Now, very early in Egypt's history, during the second and third dynasties, that is in the late 4th millennium, we notice an influx of foreign laborers from the south of Egypt, but also from the Levant or Canaan. So from the south of Egypt into Africa, but also Canaan, from the land of the Bible. Now, why is this the case? Why are foreigners coming to Egypt? From the perspective of the Levant, Egypt offered cultural goods for the elites, and in times of hardship and famine, food and water. Thus, in the biblical book of Genesis, Abraham comes from the eastern cultural center of Mesopotamia. That's where he's called by God to go to this promised land. But as soon as he arrives in this promised land, there's a severe famine. And what does Abraham do? He needs, during the famine, to find food and water. And in a region where that depended on rain, what does one do? One heads for Egypt, where the Nile offered a continuing food source. He couldn't have gone back to Mesopotamia. It's too far, and to cross the desert would be impossible. And Egypt is right down there. It's a treacherous trek, but one can make it much more than back to Mesopotamia. Now, a respected Egyptologist, Donald Redford, has remarked with respect to the constant incursions of foreigners into the Nile Delta, Egypt at all periods acted like a magnet on its neighbors. To people like those in the Levant, whose prime concerns centered on the uncertainty of the harvest and the ever-present prospect of starvation, the constancy and the superabundance of Egypt's grain production, and the richness of its stock of fish, fowl, and wild game could scarcely be resisted. Better to live a well-fed factor in Egypt than to die a starving freeman on the steppes of Asia. Whether emigrating voluntarily or sold by their village headmen or yet again captured in battle, it is doubtful whether any of the Asiatics landing up in Egypt regretted their fate." Unquote. In order to obtain materials from and goods as well as human labor from abroad, Egyptian rulers could trade, could engage in gift exchange, or carry out, as Redford mentioned in this quote, military expeditions in which they simply took what they wanted by force. In this way, they also demonstrated the undesirable penalties for those who might contemplate withholding tribute, gifts, and manpower. The official iconography and the inscriptions like to emphasize, often to a very exaggerated degree, the severity of royal retribution. I'll read one quote from here from the 6th dynasty. It's a description of an Asiatic campaign. And it goes as this: "The army returned in peace, having hacked up the land of them that are across the sand in Canaan, having pulverized the land of them that are across the sand, having razed its fortified towns, having cut down its fruit trees and its vines, having set all its dwellings on fire, and having slain the enemy troops in the 10,000s, the army returned in peace." If Canaan had long been on Egypt's sides, all the way back into the earliest part of its history, it was in the New Kingdom period, that is from about 1550 to 1077 BC, that it established an enduring imperial presence in Canaan. It's the New Kingdom period. And this New Kingdom period is important for our understanding of Israel's fate among the tide of waning and waxing imperial powers in the ancient Near East. And now we're going to turn to the New Kingdom period.